Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome to the Better Managers Briefing. I'm Anne Franca, the Chief Executive of the Chartered Management Institute, and every Friday at this time, we bring you management and leadership topics to discuss with various experts on the matters that matter in these tough times. Now, today, I'm delighted to be joined by two CMI Companions. They are both founders and owners of businesses, small businesses that are based on networking and events, the sorts of things that actually we always used to do face to face. And now we can't. And I'm going to discuss with them how they've pivoted their businesses to digital and tips for all of you on how to network digitally and participate in various events and get the most out of them. So please join me in welcoming, first of all, Vanessa Vallely, who is the founder of WeAreTheCity, an events and networking group that specializes in gender equality for many women in the financial services sector and other sectors as well. And John Jeffcock, who is the founder of Winmark, which is a networking and events company that specializes in bringing together various C-suite practitioners so that they can learn from each other. Delighted to see you both, and welcome to both of you. So my first question is, so at what moment did it occur to you during this crisis that you needed to pivot to digital, and what went through your head at that time? Maybe start with you, Vanessa.
So I think it was the beginning of March. I was doing a lot of talks for International Women's Day, absolutely packed out week, that first week of March, like it normally is. And then just kind of seeing the news, it just kind of sparked to me that this was potentially bigger than what we were seeing it at that particular time. So the first thing that we kind of did was look at the landscape of things that we had booked for the rest of the year, but then very much flipping into how can we help people if everyone's going to be locked down, if everyone's going to be self-isolating, what could we do within our own community to help others? So we quickly spun up a suite of free webinars for everyone under the We Are Virtual brand. So kind of concocted that overnight. And I remember putting a call out on the Friday, I think it was, on LinkedIn to say, you know, for all the speakers we've ever worked with, anyone who's ever spoken at conferences, will you come and help us pay it forward by providing your expertise for an hour? And by the Monday, I had an inbox full of 50 different offers. So, you know, and these are individuals that will be massively affected by kind of what's going on, that were there willing to give their time. So that was the first thing that we've done. So there's been, I think, 4,000 people have attended those webinars. There's about 55 in the series, and we're going to keep going until obviously we get back to whatever the new normal is. But the interesting thing was looking further along down the line. So our big tech conference that would normally run in November, our leadership conference that was scheduled for May, our Rising Star Awards. I mean, these are all things that require people. They require, you know, us to engage with people. I mean, people they want to pick up a physical award. They want the networking side of coming to events. So we had to think very quickly on how we did that. So it was a huge looking at tools. What could we do? How could we still keep our sponsors happy? So it was a lot of kind of quick thinking, but we learned a lot in a small period of time, which we then paid forward. So we've advised, I think, 25 other organisations and industries and not-for-profits on all the tools that are out there digitally. So sharing our experience with others so that they can mobilise quickly as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a great story. And what about you, John? Tell us your story.
I think my wife is Austrian, so we were slightly earlier on in the game, if that makes sense, because they were impacted before us. So we were starting to address it in February, and I presented a paper to the board in a very early March kind of thing. But we were quite lucky in that we put everything in the cloud about a year and a half ago. So we could act remotely quite quickly. We also did a 100% working from home test, which everyone thought was quite extreme internally, but it worked out really well. But very like Vanessa, there was a holy whatever moment when we suddenly had to turn 150 events, which were face to face, into webinars, and that wasn't. And to be quite frank, we talked about webinars before, but we hadn't really got our house in order on it. So we had to make a very quick pivot. But very fortunately, we had people who'd recently joined us who were very experienced in the area. So we managed to do that turn very quickly, but partly through luck, I would say.
Okay. Well, obviously, I think a lot of us have been relying on luck. But when you looked at your own task of converting, how did your management and leadership style change? Maybe John, you want to kick us off on that one.
Well, for us, it was a bigger than a digital pivot because it was actually a changing strategic direction. So it was a bigger, broader thing for us. So we had new vision, we had three new core objectives that sat behind that. And in terms of that, there was a whole lot of things that had to follow up from that. So we had a daily newsletter for one of our networks. We immediately put that out across all the networks, which worked very well. And in that was typically technical updates, but we included COVID-19 updates. We included what McKinsey was saying, what Bain was saying, what universities in the States were saying. So we collated all that and shared that with members. And only today I had an HR director of a charity actually turn around to me and said, those have been amazing lifelines to us, because we basically pulled the best source on stuff. We weren't as generous as Vanessa and helped other people in the sector. Whoops. The other thing that we did, which I thought worked really well, is I did a 2-3 minute daily update for the team. So I did a little video which went up at 5 to 9 every morning, and that worked really well because it got people out of bed slightly. They knew that they were going to get the boss up every morning, and so it gave them a sort of. So I think in these environments, you need a certain amount of personal, it changed your life, and you can get into a zone. So I think it was quite useful and sort of motivating people to get up and get to work, kind of thing.
Right. Okay. Well, Vanessa is very generous by nature, but how did your management and leadership style change when you pivoted?
I mean, my team we practice what we preach at WeAreTheCity anyway. So all my ladies work flexibly. They work in and around school times. So generally in the office, it's quite rare, other than a Monday, that everyone's in. It's even rarer that they see me that much for that long period of time, because I'm generally flying around the city at 90 miles an hour, doing lots of different things. So it wasn't a big transition in terms of how we work. However, when we land big things, so for example, like Rising Stars, like the conference that we're working on, that dynamic of us making sure we were all in the office so that we can bounce things off of each other was kind of missing. So again, just having that weekly leadership call, we have a WhatsApp group that we talk on all the time. But generally, we probably, and it sounds very strange, but we probably communicate more, now that we're not in the office. So using technology tools. So it's not been a massive transition, I think, for my team. I mean, a couple of my team have got young children, so they've had to balance the homeschooling side. And I remember when all of this started, they were like, we're just a bit concerned that we won't be able to give you all the hours that you need. And for me, that was a given. And I just, you just work whenever you can work. If you're on later on in the night when the kids are in bed, that's fine. I trust them. And I think there's a big element of trust within a team. I know they're getting their work done. And there was very much this kind of ethos of, okay, if you're really stacked, what can I take on? So everyone's kind of learned a bit of each other's jobs, which is a small team you need to be able to do as well. So for my own leadership style is just making sure that I'm keeping in contact with my team, that I'm also understanding of their own situations, and I'm mindful of that. So, this thing around, okay, we're all going to be sending emails at very odd times, because even myself, I've got both my kids home and looking after parents and stuff like that. So my emails are going at all sorts of times when I can grab time to work. So I think there was that acknowledgement that, okay, that is part of our new normal as well. So, but they're all still talking to me, so maybe I'm doing something right.
Well, that's I'm encouraged to hear that. So you both touched on some of the challenges and some of the opportunities, but if I were to ask now the question, tell us about some of those challenges that going virtual represents and some of the opportunities that you found. Maybe start with you, John.
On the challenge side, I guess it was threefold. We went through a strategic shift, a digital transformation, and a restructure at the same time. And so that was so we basically went through 9 months work in 2 months. So it was 14-hour days every day, and the team did unbelievably well. So but there was a lot of pressure on them. They're all a bit knackered now. They haven't had any holiday, which is their choice, if that makes sense. But actually, odd enough, team motivation is now quite high because of that. So we had that piece, and that was definitely a challenge. There's also a challenge of CEO permanently being Mr. Motivator. If that makes sense. You permanently, you know, I'm an ex-infantry captain, so I'm used to smiling in hard times, if that makes sense. It's part of the job. But it was, and it was when you saw the stuff going on externally, and you had all the painful things going on internally. It was, you had to, you know, stand up and morale. But for us, the opportunity has been quite honest, fantastic. You know, we talked a long time about going internationally, which is why we put everything in the cloud a year and a half ago. And we were opening up in Amsterdam. We were looking at Dublin. We were looking at all sorts of places, and now we've just gone global overnight. So for us, that has been a monumental change. We've been able to leverage our existing reputation, take it globally, which is really good. So our last members came from Spain, Switzerland, UAE, UK, Kuwait, US, and it's just all buying the same program now. So that's been a huge opportunity, which I don't think we'll go back on. I think that's now our future, which has been quite exciting. I also think that historically we did a lot of things in boardrooms, and boardrooms are not environments that everyone feels comfortable in. And so actually it's improved the diversity of people who attend our meetings, which is really good. And we've had, remember, we got Lloyds Banking Group as a member, and our main buyer is based in Chester, and she said, at last I can come to stuff, and so because it's virtual. So we've had a really positive response to it, and I don't so I think in a way it's been a bit of a kick up the backside for us going digital, if that makes sense. But long term, I think it's probably a really good thing, but the current environment is still a bit rough.
Yes, sure. And Vanessa, what are some of your biggest challenges, and what are the opportunities that virtual brings to you?
So I think from a challenge perspective, I say we had to move very quickly, and as a small team that doesn't have loads of resources, I think the pressure on our kind of design team to spin up 45 different images for these webinars. I think also the challenges as around people's home connectivity. You know, one of the things that we've noticed, even pulling together the conference, is, you know, people's streaming ability. You know, even we was on a call with one of our panelists the other day, and they were kind of going in and out, and then, oh, my child's on Fortnite. That's probably what's doing it. You know, pulling on the bandwidth of the internet. So I think things like that were kind of a little bit challenging. I think also we quickly had to shift the mindset of some of the companies around, you know, virtual learning, because that's what we was asking them to do. I remember talking to all my sponsors on Rising Stars, who were hugely supportive when we said, look, we're going to turn this big gala dinner into a virtual event, but here's all the other little things that we're going to do to kind of make that special. And they were so supportive. But I think from a learning perspective, you know, with our conference, that's 4 stages, 60 sessions, you know, multitude of speakers. That was a bit of a harder sell for them to visualize what we were trying to do. So I think those were the initial challenges, but they're certainly coming around to it now, and they're very engaged, and they're excited actually to be part of something new. From an opportunity standpoint, exactly the same as John, we had a global product overnight, you know, because obviously virtualizing the conference, it's enabled me to triple my content because of the platform that we're using. It's enabled me to have speakers from all over the world. It's enabled people to have, you know, to be able to attend that conference from all over. And also being digital, we're an organisation that kind of gives 20% of our tickets away to people out of work, to women returners, you know, students. But we've been able to do that en masse, you know, because we're digital. So I haven't got those massive overheads that I'm needing to recoup. So just today, you know, we're doing a kind of buy one, get one free with our corporate sponsors. So one of the companies come along and bought 100 tickets to the conference. So we've just given 100 tickets away to the likes of, you know, STEMET, Tech Up Women and all of that. So massive opportunities, not just for us, but opportunities that we've been able to pay forward to kind of other organisations. So I definitely think, you know, people were questioning about, you know, is this something we'd repeat next year? And I just think, you know, I don't think this is going to go away hugely in a quick way. So I definitely think for us, it's something to think about. What do we do next year, and how do we kind of build a bit of a hybrid model? Because I do think people need the face-to-face. There's nothing like that physical interaction to build a relationship. But I definitely think we can all expand our reach by, you know, factoring in that digital side of what we do for the future.
Sure, and that actually segues into my next question. And by the way, if you want to ask questions, please do. Just put them in the link underneath the YouTube video, and you can ask a question. But I want to build on what you were just saying, Vanessa, about what are the things that you see happening now in your businesses that you think are going to stay with us well beyond the crisis. And maybe you can share some of your thoughts. Vanessa, you started to do that. Maybe I'll stay with you. You can answer that, and then I'll go to John.
So I think some of the things that will stay is these more virtual kind of learning events, but I think they get more sophisticated. So, for example, in our conferences last year, we used to have these wonderful bits of tech called blendology badges that people could just tap, and it would, GDPR compliant, it would send your details, my details. How do we do that from a virtual perspective? So I see a lot of the kind of platforms that we're using, and we're using kind of one of the biggest virtual platforms, how do they build that in? So how do we kind of build in that networking, that people side, so that we don't miss out from that? So I definitely see more virtual events, but I see them becoming more sophisticated in terms of what they offer. So definitely that. I see more people kind of working from home again, this hybrid model, big CEOs questioning themselves, do we really need these big buildings? Are regional hubs the way to go? I think that leads to much more flexibility, not just for women, because flex isn't a women's issue, for women and men, and for us to have an easier working life. I think that's kind of the things that I see in the future, and that's definitely what I hope that we'll see more of.
Sure. And John, what about you? What do you think will stay with us well beyond COVID?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think a lot of our members are grappling with that. I look at it in a way. You look at what's going to stick and what's going to unwind, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And things that make things as sort of stick and unwind are the sort of barriers to market. So things like this, historically people didn't know the technology, and now they do, and now they're more familiar with it. So that's likely to stick, if that makes sense. And you've got the motivators and the events behind motivators. The motivations behind events haven't changed, whether it's virtual or online. What has changed is the trade-offs. You don't now have to travel. You don't create the pollution. You don't have the time you lose away from your family. So there's a really good. So I think there are a lot of the virtual stuff will stick. When we survey our members, they want to go back to 50% face-to-face and 50% virtual, which is quite interesting. That's a general thing they're saying to us. For us, our business model has changed probably permanently. Our finance changed. We managed to cut the price of memberships on the back of it, which is really good because we've gone virtual. It's also made our business model slightly cleaner, which is quite interesting for us. And so the roles are clearer, so people know what they're doing, and more. So in a way, that's quite good HR benefit for it. And the other thing for us, from a client perspective, we've always had a sort of you join with your top team, but now that top team can be 100 people, whereas before it was 4 or 5. But if it's digital, where we're not, there's no cost of extra bodies. If that makes sense. So that's been able to exponentially increase the value we have, and that's quite interesting, because if you have more people in the mix, you have more influence on what you can do. So I was on a D&I call this morning with an advisory panel that we set up, and we can now tap into a lot more people than we could have done historically for that initiative. So it's been really good in that way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We did a survey at CMI and we got the exact same result: blended working. So maybe 2.5, 3 days in the office, 2.5, 3 days at home seems to be overwhelmingly preferred by a large number of people. But you mentioned your members, and now I want to ask actually how they are changing their management and leadership approaches in this crisis. Now, Vanessa, you are a huge advocate for women, and also women rising up, and women from ethnic minorities and others. And, what do you see? How do you see their management and leadership and their way of working changing and adapting in the future?
I think in the very beginning, I think we was all in a bit of a state of flux, in terms of how does that work and stuff like that. I think, now everyone's getting kind of more comfortable with how those things, and again, just questioning their own kind of leadership style. On other panels I've been in, we talked about more empathy, and to John's point earlier on, just how we're engaging with teams and not just talking about my little team, but like when I'm on a call with all of my stakeholders, for everything that we're doing. To John's point about people having more, everyone's in the same size box, if that makes any sense, on the screen. So you're hearing voices that you wouldn't have normally heard. You're hearing a more expression of opinion. So I think, a couple of other panels that I'm on, the ladies were saying on there as well that, you know, it's been much more an engaging experience. The leaders are learning so much more about their own people, and that's helping them to adapt their leadership style, to listen more. And I think being virtual, and I don't think it's healthy to be on Zoom calls all day. I say I'm a victim of what I call Zoomitis at the moment. But you are getting that landscape of people and the different opinions, and everyone's got a voice. So that's kind of what I've been hearing from some of the larger organizations that I've been working with.
No, that's great. And John, you work with various C-suite executives across all functions. How is this changing their approach to the way they work and their leadership style?
I think the going back to the office thing is going to be really interesting. And I also think it presents a huge opportunity for social housing, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but I think a lot of retail and property and office property is going to be freed up, and so I think there's a huge opportunity to address our social housing issues in the UK if we get off if we do that. If that makes sense. I just think it's been really interesting for me. You know, I was told by my chair about this. Sounds really weird. I told my chair about a year ago to stop wearing a tie, and now everyone's becoming incredibly informal, and these things are quite intimate. You see someone very close to you. You'll see someone on screen very close to you. So I think it has changed completely the way people interact with each other, in a really healthy way. So I do think suits are gone, and I think that informality, and it's broken down tons of barriers. It's exactly to Vanessa's point. It's broken down tons of barriers. So I think it's been quite a good thing for society. I wrote a post the other day saying as our capital assets sort of collapse, if that makes sense, our intangible assets grow, because everyone in the streets have WhatsApp groups. The people are much more familiar with each other. People go and clap in the streets when they're block of houses, kind of thing. So I think it's been a really good thing for society, actually, and internally. And I agree with Vanessa's point exactly. As a CEO, you get much more feedback now than you used to. People are used to giving feedback on that, which I think is a really good thing. When people might have been quiet in the past, then they're not anymore. So I think it's been quite a healthy social thing as well. Yeah.
Well, that's some very profound community benefits, and I agree with a lot of what both of you have said. Now, I'm going to start opening up to the questions, but before we do, I just have to ask each of you, because of your specialist in this, could you please share for our audience, what's your top tip for networking virtually? Vanessa, what would you say?
I would say, obviously we've got great tools out there, right, like LinkedIn and stuff like that. And I just think this is an ideal opportunity to perhaps rekindle some of those connections that you may have lost. So reaching out to people through LinkedIn, engagement on Twitter is always amazing. I've met some of the most incredible people just on Twitter, and I've probably built a third of my conference through Twitter as well, just kind of reaching out to people, can we have a chat? People I wouldn't have normally accessed. So I'd say use the tools that you've got. Don't be afraid to approach someone. If they ignore you, okay, move on and you'll talk to someone else. But I do think that, continuing to expand your network during this time is really, really important. As I was saying to someone this morning, if I look at the conference that we've built, We Are Tech Women, I'd say a good 50% of that has been built out on speakers I've never met. I've engaged with them via LinkedIn or Twitter, or even one I got through to Facebook. But I've built a huge global network sitting on my sofa over the past kind of 6 weeks. So that has been incredible. And I can't wait to meet them face to face, but I feel like I already know them anyway. So yeah, use the tools you have. Definitely.
That's a great story. And John, what's your top tip?
I would agree with everything Vanessa said, actually. I think it's very good. I use LinkedIn a lot, so I got a silly amount of connections on it. I would say exactly as Vanessa says, go for gold in terms of connectivity, and particularly relevant connectivity. So go for gold in terms of people who can be useful to you. But then I think you do want to follow it up with a Zoom call or some form of sort of face-to-face bit after you've done that, because I think there's an old saying that you need to meet people 4 times before you have a relationship. So I think there's something around that. So I think you can link in with them, but I think you need to somehow engage with them through a Zoom call or something after that, and then you're in. And even very senior people now are open for things they might not have been historically. So I think now is a really good opportunity to get out there and expand your network.
Great. So go for gold. So thank you both. Now I'm going to open it up to questions, and here's one from Evelyn. How important do you think it is that digital tools for events are integrated to your website and CRM? Is it better to press ahead now or wait for integration? Well, let's see. Vanessa, what do you think?
So I'm actually going to pass this one on to John, because this isn't my area of expertise, believe it or not. So I'm not going to try and bluff it and give the wrong answer. So John, I'm hoping you can answer this one.
Yeah, no, I can answer this one. So we use Salesforce, and we use GoToWebinar, we use Zoom, and we also have an online site. And so my view is you've got to track membership engagements, which is absolutely key. And if the systems aren't linked up, you have a problem on what's going on. So I'd say you buy the systems. The cost of tailoring them is spectacularly expensive, and you then got to integrate them with each other. And the integration is, we are lucky. We've got I use a fantastic sort of super nerd internally who's really good at that, and she has put the whole thing together, and it's worked really well. But it has transformed the way we operate, because we now print engagement reports on individual accounts, and that's really useful. So we know what they've attended, what they've touched, what they've responded to, what they're opening, what they're not opening. And so me, I think integration is key. But you've got to deliver the service first, if that makes sense. So I think you've got to deliver on the ground the value, and then behind the scenes, then catch up as fast as you can on the integration, is what I'd say.
It sounds like you're saying, but don't forget to integrate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just for our perspective, we can't afford things like Salesforce. So we're very much what I call string and cup when it comes to some of this stuff, So, but I mean, we do have a look at analytics and things like that. We just don't have the amazing tools, probably more labor intensive the way that we do it. Is this working? More trial and error from our account. But, one day when we grow up, maybe we'll be able to afford something like that.
Well, you still have impressive reach, and you've built a global community from your sofa. So there you go. I'm going to go to the question from Karen. Have you had any stumbles in the transformation you've made, and what can we learn from them? So who wants to take that one first? This is about learning from stumbles or things that haven't worked.
I'm happy to talk to this. Nothing's ever easy, right? Despite what the gloss that you see on any social media platform, there's always some nightmare going on in the background, as to how you do it. So, we've had many stumbles, even on our webinars, people not being able to connect. Have we got the right links in here? Did that one record? Or, oh my God, we've recorded it, it's got no sound. So we've had so many different kind of stumbles, and we learn as we go. But I think, you just have to take it into the context of the situation that we're in and the environment that we're in at the moment. Nothing is insurmountable, nothing you can't come back with. And I think people are a lot more kind of understanding at the moment around those stumbles. But from our perspective as a team, if our biggest test obviously is coming up with a conference, because it's so complex that day, but we will learn from it and we will revisit it afterwards. And again, we're a big advocate of sharing our learning. So we'll probably put something out and tips for others and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I think what's also just the speed at which we had to transform. There wasn't the normal perhaps processes and stuff like that even as a small organization that we would have got done. It was more like, let's do it right now, so, and then we'll clear up the mess afterwards. So it's more just kind of get it done, but
a lot more agile. That's what we call agile.
Very, very, very agile, and I'm sure we'll look back and think we could have done things better. But as I say, I think people are very forgiving in these current times anyway.
Great. John, what about your stumbles and what you learned?
How long have you got? We've had the classic Zoom clash. We had two events at the same time, and Zoom, we had the right license, but for some reason Zoom didn't work, and that was so we had to cancel 100+ events with HMRC, with our tax rates network, which is slightly embarrassing. But my big learn probably as a person is probably around people and communications. I did a ring round when it all started. I was very concerned about people we had quite a few sort of single people here who lived on their own. I was very concerned about people who live sort of on their own in our environment and how that can affect their mental health. So we did a big ring round. We spent a lot of time on that. I then, because with so much happening so quickly, I didn't do that ring round enough, if that makes sense. I did it once and then twice. I probably should have done it at least every other week. So I probably should have done it 6 times rather than twice, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's always worth, if you're going to, we went through a painful process through a restructure, and you have to do things by the law, but the law is quite a brutal process. And I always think you talk to lawyers, and lawyers don't really get humanity. So I always think I always think, did we do enough? Did we do enough to not help things? I think we did enough to help people, but to communicate enough to make sure they were okay in certain areas. So I think there is probably more we could have done on that in hindsight, probably. So my lessons would be people communication lessons, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's very, very vital. Okay, this might be our last question, or maybe we'll have time for one more, but it's from Layla. It's a good question. She's asking, do you think people can form the same valuable connections through digital events versus traditional face-to-face? So, Vanessa, what do you think?
So I think you can't beat that face-to-face interaction. But I think the whole kind of last few months has taught us, it's certainly taught me, that you can build relationships. If you think about it, this isn't new, right? There are global companies that operate like this all the time, and they get work done and they build relationships. I mean, even when I was back in investment banking, there were people that I dealt with out in India and various other countries that I'd never met until I actually visited, and we had a great relationship. And just that face-to-face was just like the final cherry on the pie, if you like. But we knew each other. We knew each other's families. We knew each other's kids' names and stuff like that, because we built up that relationship over time. So I don't think it's a showstopper not meeting someone face to face. But on the flip side, as say, that physical connection, I think, that you have when you meet someone is something that's really, really important. But not to be deterred from the way that we are at the moment.
Great. And John, what's your view?
All I'd add to that, because I agree with everything said, is that I think these sort of systems work very well for sharing knowledge. I think they're less good at creative activity, if that makes sense. So I think if you want to brainstorm something or something like that, it's more useful to go face to face. I think they have their roles, but I agree entirely, Vanessa. It is good meeting people. So even the Google has all its stuff on online, but it still runs conferences for its own people. So face to face is a key element. Yeah.
Well, I want to leave it there. I thank you both. That was incredibly insightful. You both have been very honest and engaging, and good luck with your global virtual communities. And I'm delighted that you've built them whilst sat at home on your sofas, or with your books in the background. So thank you again, and join us next week, where my special guest will be the director of the Government Equalities Office, and we'll be probing what does all of this mean for diversity and inclusion, and how can companies make sure that they leave this crisis more diverse and inclusive than they began it. So thank you again. Have a great week. And thanks again, Vanessa and John.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.